And this symposium, as you know, and is quite obvious, has been rescheduled from April 2020 and is now going to proceed via Zoom. My name, to those of you who don't know me, is Helle Porsdam, and I'm a professor of law and humanities at the University of Copenhagen, Denmark, where I also hold a UNESCO Chair in cultural rights. So we were supposed to have met in Cambridge in the UK on April 1 and 2nd, but then Corona got in the way. Our symposium was supposed to take place at CRASSH, which is the Center for Research in the Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities, University of Cambridge. We had all looked forward to going and to meeting each other in person, but sadly, that was not to be. So we're doing this symposium in collaboration with Dr. Inanna Hamati-Ataya, who heads Gloknos, which is the Center for Global Knowledge Studies. And this is a center that is situated at and affiliated with CRASSH. So Gloknos is a multidisciplinary research center and intellectual community that is concerned with the constitution, diffusion, exchange, and use of human knowledges throughout history. I proudly sit on its advisory board and would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Hamati-Ataya for the opportunity to work with her and with Sam Peel at Gloknos. Our symposium, as you know, concerns the right to science and the 2017 UNESCO recommendation on science and scientific researchers. And now, what is the right to science? Well, the thing is that we all have a human right to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress. This is the one that we abbreviate to the right to science. It has this particular human right has its origins in Article 27 of the United Nations 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted in the wake of World War II. The article recognizes everyone's right, and I quote now from the Universal Declaration, everyone's right to share in scientific advancement and its benefits, unquote. In 1966, the UN turned these commitments into binding obligations under international law with two international treaties called covenants. One of them is on civil and political rights, and the other one is on economic, social, and cultural rights, and that's the one we're primarily interested in here. Article 15 of this Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights repeats the contents of Article 27 of the Universal Declaration by saying that everyone has, and I quote again from the Covenant, everyone has a right to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress and its applications. That is, a right to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress and its applications. The implication is that just as governments are expected to respect the rights to, say, freedom of speech and due process, so they also have to adopt measures to respect and ensure the right to science. The existence of this right is, of course, important for researchers, but it's also important for society. It adds a legal and moral dimension to a whole range of very fundamental issues, including, for example, scientific freedom, scientific funding, and policy, as well as access to data, materials, and knowledge. But despite its potential for furthering science and human rights causes, the right to science has not received the attention that we think it deserves. Now, several of the speakers at this symposium are co-members of a study group, which was first started by our first speaker on the program today, Dr. Sebastian Porsdam-Mann, when he was a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Bioethics at the Harvard Medical School a few years ago. When he was there, he worked together with Christine Mitchell, who is the executive director of the Center for Bioethics, and the two of them decided to start a study group on this little known and understudied human right, the right to science. Members of this group, which has since grown in size, have met a few times, and I very much hope that we can continue working together in the future. The last time that we succeeded in getting together in person was in Dubrovnik, Croatia, in May of 2019, when one of our speakers at this symposium, Professor Stepan Oreskovic, organized a very interesting workshop on the right to science at the Inter-University Center in Dubrovnik. A year after our Dubrovnik workshop, COVID-19 hit. And one of the clear messages to emerge around the world during the COVID-19 crisis is exactly how important it is to understand the ways in which science can assist society, but just as crucially, I think also how society can engage with and can shape science. The human right to science is key to all this, and it has never been more important. Even before the COVID-19 health crisis, it was evident that people around the world increasingly rely on science and technology in almost every sphere of their lives, from the development of medicines and the treatment of diseases to transportation, agriculture, and the facilitation of global communication. This is reflected in the United Nations 2030 Agenda with its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which emphasize the importance of science and technology for sustainable development. But at the same time, the value of science has been under attack, with some people raising alarm at the emergence of fake news and post-truth societies. Dual use and unintended, because often unforeseen, consequences of emerging technologies are also perceived to be a serious risk. Dual use refers to scientific research, especially in the life sciences, that can be used both in a beneficent way, but also has the potential to cause harm. You can think of biological research that has a legitimate scientific purpose, but where the results can be misused to pose a biological threat to public health or national security, or indeed both of them. Now, the important role played by science and technology and the potential for dual use makes it imperative that we assess scientific research and its products not only on their scientific merits, but also on their human rights merits. That's the background for this workshop. Okay, so what do the words of the first part of Article 15 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the wording being the right to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress and its applications, what indeed do those words refer to? Roughly speaking, 4 different things. First of all, they refer to the material results of scientific research, medicines, vaccinations, and technological instruments. Secondly, they refer to the scientific knowledge and information that derives from scientific activity. Thirdly, the role of science informing critical and responsible citizens who are able to participate fully in a democratic society. That role is also referred to. And fourthly, the meaning of the first part of Article 15 also refers to evidence-based decision-making processes in a democratic society. So the coronavirus pandemic has provided a clear illustration of how the benefits of science do not merely relate to getting a vaccination or to having access to the best treatment available. They also absolutely concern people's access to the knowledge that they need in order to participate in a responsible manner in democratic dialogue. Article 15 of the Covenant, this important article when it comes to the right to science, also has 3 other parts. The second part asks states to develop and disseminate science. There will be no right to science without the dissemination of science. The third part asks states to respect the freedom of scientific research. And then the final 4th part requires states parties to recognize the benefits of international contacts and cooperation in the scientific fields. So that is the necessity for openness internationally in science. Our speakers today and tomorrow are going to reflect in various ways on these different parts of Article 15 and on how they relate to the 2017 UNESCO recommendation on science and scientific researchers. This recommendation supersedes and updates the 1974 UNESCO recommendation on the status of scientific researchers, as it was called. What happened was that at the 2013 General Conference of UNESCO, it was decided to begin a process to revise the old recommendation in consultation with member states and other stakeholders over a period of 4 years from 2014 to 13 to 17, sorry. Specifically, and of particular interest to us, is that the General Conference wanted the revised recommendation to, and I quote from the recommendation now, to reflect the contemporary ethical and regulatory challenges relating to the governance of science and science-society relationships, in order to provide a powerful and relevant statement of science ethics as the basis for science policies that would favor the creation of an institutional order conducive to the realization of Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, unquote. So this is how the General Conference wanted the recommendation to be updated along those lines. The recommendation was adopted in November 2017, and it recognizes in its preamble the significant value of science as a common good, and that's very important. It also promotes a fair and appropriate status of scientific researchers and calls for adequate national science, technology, and innovation policies and policies to ensure that societies use knowledge from all scientific fields in a responsible manner. The implementation of the recommendation in member states is monitored by the UNESCO governing bodies. The idea is that every 4 years, the Secretariat of UNESCO is going to collect information from member states in consultation with other partners. And this is going to happen for the first time in the spring of 2021. Our speakers today and tomorrow come from very different academic disciplines and backgrounds. And this reflects very nicely, I think, the interdisciplinary nature of research on the right to science and the many different stakeholder interests that are involved in this particular human right. Solving complex problems relating to science and technology requires the ability to work across disciplines and practices, to ask the right questions in transdisciplinary settings, and then to map the problems from different conceptual perspectives. Our first speaker today, Dr. Sebastian Porsdam from the Faculties of Law and Philosophy at the University of Oxford, has a background in bioethics. He's going to look at the issue of scientific freedom as it is foregrounded in the 2017 UNESCO recommendation. Then our second speaker, Yvonne Dunders, is a professor of international human rights and cultural diversity at the University of Amsterdam. And she will tell us about the 2017 recommendation as a part of international law, how it relates to international human rights law. And finally, our third speaker today is John Norton, an emeritus professor of the Public Understanding of Technology at the Open University, and also a director of the Press Fellowship Program at Wolfson College, University of Cambridge. And he's going to share with us what it is like to be a public intellectual focusing on science and technology in the British media. So in various ways, these three talks reflect on and relate to the second, third, and fourth part of Article 15 of the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Those are the parts that require states parties to develop and disseminate science, to respect the freedom of scientific research, and also to recognize the international nature of scientific research.